Thanks for joining the VIFF Podcast. Today we're joined by Josephine Anderson, who will discuss Girl Power, her latest documentary, and her VR project, Texada. Welcome to the VIFF Podcast. This is your chance to get the inside track from the people behind the films you love and the films you're about to discover. This podcast was recorded on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Recorded during the 43rd edition of the Vancouver International Film Festival, these conversations take us behind the scenes with the creators bringing their work to the big screen. My name is Curtis Woloschuk. I'm the Director of Programming for the festival, and this week I'm joined by Josephine Anderson. Josephine's latest film is Girl Power, which charts 5 teenage girls as they aspire to become champions for their age group, while also navigating the perils of teenagehood. Josephine, welcome.
Oh, it's nice to be here.
We should say you also have another piece at the festival as well, Texada, which is a VR piece, and I kind of love the balance between like a VR piece and something almost primordial of just sliding a rock along a sheet of ice, and wondering what it's like as an artist to kind of be presenting these two very different works at the festival.
Yeah, they almost couldn't be further from one another. One is like a coming of age film about a bunch of teenage girls, and one is about geologic time and rocks. Yeah, so different, but such a joy to get to make both of them. And yeah.
Are they that different? As you say it that way, I'm like, maybe there are some parallels there. We have a passage of time because you chart. It's kind of a long follow for these girls, and also, yeah.
That's true. I guess if I were to dig, I could find some correlations. I was talking about the VR piece yesterday night and to somebody at one of the VIFF events, and describing the way that it explores, the smallness of humans within the grand expanse of geologic time, and the way that we just take these moments that we all share with one another to be so precious and so vital and important. But, when you really peel back and take that big look at time, none of it really matters, right? So what's the tug and the push and pull between those two things? And I think with Girl Power, I'm sure that those themes are at play at some level as well. It's about these fleeting moments of our lives and the way that we try to grip onto each other as we're flung through the chaos of growing up. And you can't cling on. Ultimately, you have to kind of keep moving. So yeah, maybe there's some correlation there.
I think that earlier version of yourself may have been wrong. They could not be any about being so different.
Yeah.
No, it's a lovely parallel that you drew there as well. And we've talked to a few filmmakers throughout the festival who've demonstrated fluidity in their careers of like moving between maybe narrative and nonfiction work. But this is also not your first foray into virtual filmmaking. And wondering for yourself, what maybe sets you on the course for each project? Is it you talked about some of the thematics of the work, and wondering maybe the balance between thematics and then format.
I think it's, for me so far, I've been interested in just playing, I think, in terms of format. And it's nice to approach projects with that openness. Like, what would be the most interesting or maybe most entertaining for me format to play within? Early in my career, I was really inspired by interactive works and made my first sort of big project was an interactive web doc back in the early days of interactive filmmaking. And I think it was quite freeing as a new filmmaker to play in a format that wasn't super developed, kind of like within the industry. And with virtual reality, same thing. I have no experience with that prior to this project, but just had that curiosity of what would it be like to play within that realm. But I do feel like my sort of like baseline is film, a more traditional film in a sense, and yo-yoing between those modes, I guess, of sort of more linear, I won't say traditional filmmaking, but more linear filmmaking and more format breaking modes. I think it's a great way to keep alert and invigorated. I don't know.
I'm curious, were there any applications from the working in VR, or like the process to it, that you then applied to linear filmmaking?
I would that's tricky. I would say more so the other direction. I found that for example, in making Texada, our virtual reality piece, I was really interested in finding ways to take these little bits of sort of audio interview that we had created and mash them up and have enough of a bed to root people in a sense of story. A lot of VR projects can be really experiential and really abstracted, which is super interesting. But how do you maybe bring those documentary film elements of story and merge them with an experiential? Like for me, that's more interesting personally.
We had the Tragically Hip here on the weekend, like the kind of quintessential Canadian band, and it felt like there maybe could not be another greater moment of Canadiana in the festival to some degree. But when we get around to Curl Power screening, perhaps this will best it. And maybe just curious about your entry point into the film. Was the sport a device through which to explore the relationships of your subjects, or did the sport have appeal for you as well? And then you discovered your 5 girls around that.
Mm-hmm. I started this project because I was playing in a beer league curling team. I wasn't very good, and I've shared this before. It was really this like little tiny nugget of an idea of, wouldn't it be kind of interesting to explore the awkwardness of teenager within what I was finding to be a super awkward but fun sport, a weird and wonderful one. Of course, if you're really good at curling, it's not awkward at all. It's absolutely like beautiful and delicate and sort of precise. But for me at that stage, it was awkward. I was finding that relationship between the ideas of teenagehood and curling to be kind of prescient, and so decided to explore it. But from the earliest stages, I felt like curling was like this kind of fodder or background or world that could hold an interesting story rather than, feeling motivated to do justice to the sport. So that was my approach. It was really more of a character forward project from the beginning.
A previous short film of yours, On Falling, looked at the kind of the physical toll that a sporting pursuit could take on your subjects. And I think maybe with Curl Power, we see more so, be it the age or the family dynamics, the emotional toll that can be taken on the subjects, and wondering about kind of your approach to building a level of trust or a level of intimacy with subjects that made them comfortable sharing as much as they do in the film.
Mm-hmm. Well, we filmed for 3.5 years, so naturally you get to know one another and build some trust that way. But maybe at any given point along that route, when you're making a long-term longitudinal film, it's possible for the subject or the participants to want to pull out. That happens to people, or feel doubt around the project. So for me, continuing to make sure that trust was maintained through the whole process was obviously really important. We would talk on the phone every few weeks. So you can imagine there's so much that happens from when you're 14 until 18. And I became kind of inadvertently just this kind of additional, I wasn't a parent, I wasn't a therapist, but I was just this sort of I wasn't a teacher. I was just this sort of other adult force in their life that was just listening. And I think that naturally builds trust. I mean, we all love to be listened to, and to feel like somebody is kind of unconditionally going to keep showing up for years on end, no matter what they're going through, I think naturally bred trust.
Yeah. Unconditionally, but with a camera.
But with a camera. Unconditionally with some conditions.
With a waiver to sign.
Yeah, with a waiver. Like unconditionally in terms of you can believe I will continue to show up. I'm not going to bail on my commitment to the project, so to speak.
When you shoot over 3.5 years and do this kind of long follow of your documentary subjects, for yourself, is there ever a moment of, or maybe not of doubt, but knowing where you are in the arc? Like 2 years in, you could be 3/4 the way through the film, or you could be the first 5 minutes, the pre-credit sequence, and just wondering for yourself how you're kind of tracking what you're seeing in real life, and then maybe transposing that into a narrative framework.
Mm-hmm. That's so tricky. Because there could have been a world in which they had some massive success, extremely early in my filming. What would happen then? My concept might have been really upside down at that point. I found to some level, you're tracking what's happened. I was tracking what was happening, but to some level, I was just like, okay, if I if I follow each of their individual arcs as people, and continue to find progression within their individual threads, I'm going to trust that as a group and as a sort of like holistic film, the narrative will have some arc that works, even though I'm not totally sure, because we're filming so much. And how are these going to weave together if one person's having this kind of crisis at this point in their time, life, and one is over here? How do you organize this into a format that often, often you're going to want this sort of like build up and then climax and building, stakes and all this stuff. Like, yes, it was actually kind of stressful to not know 100% if I would fall into some pattern with the footage that worked. But I felt like, okay, there's enough going on in each of their individual threads that we can rest easy at a base level.
Well, I think one of the natural dramatic elements to the film as well is the fact that three of the coaches or three of the moms who are coaches are also Olympic champions themselves. When it's an interesting year where we have like some films. Neo Sora's Happy End. He's the son of the composer Sakamoto, and kind of these like family legacies playing out in different films. And here we see it in this sporting context. And wondering, was this part of your I don't know if casting process is the right term to use, but as you were determining which team you would kind of follow, was that family dynamic something that really settled you on this being the team?
No, honestly, it was just a happy accident that the coaches were also their moms and like super accomplished curlers in their own right. Definitely was not something I was casting for. But once we started filming, it was clear that this extra dynamic or extra layer was really interesting. I mean, we're like, everybody has to navigate some sense of like, following in the shadows or footsteps of our elders and then pulling away from them. And this was just really upfront in our face, right? Like their mothers have been to the Olympics, been to the World Championships. And here we are with this group of teens who are really just at the earliest stages of their threads in the sport. So, yeah.
There are a number of narrative or nonfiction works to kind of draw upon in terms of observing kind of this coming of age observational approach. And I think the film distinguishes itself in being like, quite observational. There's never kind of a pointed inquiry or you don't feel the directorial hand in it. And wondering if you drew inspiration from particular works in terms of how you wanted to approach this, or maybe it was like conversations with other filmmakers who've approached a work like this.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily I certainly took a lot of inspiration from a few films that I'll tell you about, but I won't pretend to say that I actually succeeded in emulating these like awesome films that I've seen and felt inspired by. But for me, like there's a film that came out maybe a decade ago called All This Panic. Have you seen it? It started at Tribeca, and it's about a group of girls who growing up in New York City. They're just friends, and it really just follows them as they kind of tumble towards their adulthood. And I found that film super inspiring. And definitely that was a reference. I also really love Alma Harrell's work. It's so dreamy. It's so like her film Love True is incredible, and Bombay Beach. And we didn't push as hard into these kind of like hybrid, like is this documentary or is this fiction moments as she does in her documentaries. But certainly that like emphasis on emotional resonance through all the scenes, like using emotion as our kind of guiding force, was definitely inspired by her and her work as well.
Yeah, one of my favorite VIFF memories was seeing Bombay Beach on the big screen here. It's such a exceptional film.
It's still exceptional all these years later. It's amazing. Wondering then as well, you've on Falling and this film, you've also captured the sport itself, and
even though these sports are always broadcast on television, in cinematic terms, sometimes I find some filmmakers do struggle with like knowing how to capture the nuances of the sport, the drama of the sport. And how long did it take you to kind of settle upon your approach to capturing the curling itself?
Mm-hmm. It's like an ongoing struggle, even right up until the end. Honestly, filming curling is so difficult. If anyone is familiar with curling, it's a 2.5 hour like frame to finish a game, and you're playing on this like long sheet of ice. All the action is on like opposing ends, and you have your skip calling from this end, and you've got someone pushing off and throwing their rock from this side, and so you're just like, it's actually so impossible to really get like a condensed visual moment. Right. So honestly, we just kept adding more and more cameras as we went until we had about 3 cameras. And then at that point, our budget wouldn't allow any more, although I would have preferred to have more. And we got good at, our camera folks got good at following the action. But no, filming curling is hard. So I can't really say that I like early on nailed the vision. And no, it was like riding by the seat of our pants every bonspiel. Like, okay, let's try to nail this even more than we did the last time and really get it. Like, it's a process.
Well, the film had its premiere at Hot Docs, and it's played a few other festivals now. And you were saying before we started recording, it kind of will continue on a Canadian tour of sorts. Wondering what the balance has been that you found between people who have, I don't know what like hardcore curling folks are called, even though I have them in my family, but kind of like people who are drawn by the sport and people who are drawn by the narrative and perhaps to learn something about the sport. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's easy to get curlers to come out to the film because there are almost no films about curling except for maybe Men with Brooms, which is like, a whole different thing. So far, the curling community has been super psyched on the film, and that's wonderful. But there have been many other folks who've come, maybe stumbled into the film through hearing about it or whatnot, and are surprised to find that the film resonates with them, which has been really lovely to observe as the filmmaker. It's easy with a film that's 8 women as our central participants. It's really, really easy to say like men probably won't be as interested in this film. It's for women. Like, it's so easy for people to feel that way, especially within the sort of cinematic climate we are in. Like, women will watch films about anything, anybody, right? And there's this assumption that men maybe won't. Maybe they're only interested in stories about men. So a film like this is interesting because you're really going like, do you want to see a bunch of if you're like a 40-something-year-old man, do you want to see a film about a bunch of teenage girls going through like emotional stuff? It sounds so like silly, but these are the cogs that turn people's mind. And but I've found, like, for example, the men who have been in the theater and they've been so into it. I don't know if it's because it's like a gift to get to like walk in the shoes of a teenage girl for an hour and a half. I don't know. So yeah, I'm finding that this film has obviously a resonance with the curling community, but beyond that, I think maybe the emotional vulnerability is relatable regardless of who you are or whether you like curling or whatnot.
I'm curious about as well has this opened the door wide or too wide for like curling puns in reviews and write-ups? Have you found yourself the victim of such things like hurry hard to curl power before tickets are gone?
Yeah,
and
that one
things
has been said.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I if I'm being honest, I love a good pun. As you can tell, curl power is a pun, so it makes you kind of roll your eyes, but also it's enjoyable. I don't mind.
That's lovely. We're going to reach over to the random box of questions here to wrap things up. Okay. We'll see what the fates hold for you in terms of these hard-hitting questions that we posed here.
Popcorn questions.
What's a film you watched as a kid that completely scared you, but now seems silly?
I can answer this. Well, I remember like watching Land Before Time and being spooked by it, but loving it, but like being on the edge of my seat. Like I don't want to, I hope my parents let me watch this. I mean, it's a goofy movie about some dinosaurs. I don't know what scared me about it, but I really, I felt that way. But that Land Before Time, all of them, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know how many there are. They're all awesome.
But terrifying.
But terrifying for
at the right age.
Yeah, a 6-year-old.
Excellent. Yeah. Josephine, thank you so much for joining us today and talk about both projects.
Thanks, Curtis.
You have been listening to the VIFF Podcast. Thanks to our community broadcast partner, Tell Us Story Hive, for their support. If you're enjoying the show, please rate and review the podcast and be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Also, please visit VIFF to learn more about the festival and our year-round programming at the VIFF Center.